Alright, this is a video for Chapter 2 in Music Fundamentals, and we're going to talk about rhythm. Yeah! Okay, so rhythm is the other aspect of music. We've talked about pitch and how to notate it, where to put the pitches on the staff. Now we're going to talk about rhythm. If you were to try to devise a system where you could notate something so that an audible event would happen at a particular interval in time, where would you begin? I mean, that's kind of a good question that this asks here. You can see this is an early music manuscript, and you can see that, you know, it's just a bunch of dots and beams, and it's on a staff. We kind of recognize that, but that'd be pretty difficult to read. Over the years, the music notation has evolved and been refined and become a lot easier to read, for us anyway. They might not think so back then, but for us it has been. So we're going to talk about how to notate rhythm. This is chapter 2, section 1. Okay, so the text talks about the way that the beat is organized, and the beat actually comes from our own heartbeat. That's the beat that we have inside of us. So if you stop, you can listen and feel your heartbeat. And when we hear music that is faster than our heartbeat, we get excited. When we hear music that is slower than our heartbeat, it kind of calms us down. It can anyway. And so that's where we get tempo, and we'll talk more about that as we go on. But the beat in music is that underlying pulse. So like if I were to play this, you might try to think, okay, where's the beat? I've got different rhythms going on, right? So we're probably like, right? So that's kind of the underlying beat, and you can have all kinds of different things going on. Like if I had that same tempo, right? So you have this going on. So that's but the beat still stays the same, and we have this melody that's a little bit slower, right? And put them together, and you get some music, but you still got this underlying beat. Now, beats in music are usually organized into a recurring pattern. These little examples have a little drum that sounds and kind of tells you, but shows you what it is. But for instance, this one is a two beat pattern. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. And if you see people directing music, you see them go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. You know, you can also organize it into a 3-beat pattern. Right? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And usually there's a strong beat on the downbeat, and that's called a metric accent. That's where the meter, usually at the beginning of what we call a measure, and every time it repeats 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, so that'd be a measure. Every time it repeats, that's a measure of music. And usually the downbeat, or the first beat of that measure, is the strongest beat. And you've got 4, you know, you got a 4-beat pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So those metric accents are at the beginning of each measure. Now the way that we notate that is we separate measures by bar lines, right? So you've got a whole measure here, and then you've got a bar line, and then you've got music, and then you've got a bar line. And the bar line just shows us where those strong beats are. And you can have one bar line, or you can have 2 bar lines, or a double thick bar line at the ending. And that just kind of separates the sections of music. Okay, so that's a pretty easy introduction to that. Let's move on to section 2. So this is where it kind of gets a little more complicated. So this is a pretty good representation of how music is notated. So a whole note, that means that you get four beats. Let's say that the beat is the quarter note, okay? So let's say a whole note would get 4 beats, and a half note looks kind of like a whole note, except it's just got a stem on it. And then a quarter note looks kind of like a half note, except it's filled in and with a stem. This is called a stem. And then an eighth note actually has looks like a quarter note, and then it's got this little thing called a flag. Okay, so you've got the note head. That's called the note head. This is called the note head. Here's the stem. And here is the flag. Okay, so and then with this, and the way that this works is each whole note gets twice as many beats as a half note, and a half note gets twice as many beats as a quarter note, and so forth. So if our beat were this, and we had all quarter notes, like what's written right there on the screen, then we'd play 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And if we had eighth notes, then our beat would be here. Sorry. Okay. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and so the beat's here, quarter note, but we're playing eighth notes. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and so you're getting twice two notes per beat. Okay. And we'll look at some rhythms here. All right, so let's talk about how to write this stuff. Now I've shown you how to write a treble clef. I'll just do one here. If I can get this going here. Not the best one. Okay, so a whole note is actually just a circle. You just write it right, and you want the circle to fill up the whole space. And if it's on a line, you just put it on the line like that. Okay? A half note is the same thing, except you put a flag on it. Okay? Same thing here for a half note. Okay? And the bar lines, they go all the way down from the top line to the bottom line, all the way through the staff. Okay? So when we get to quarter note, you just do a circle and fill it in, and then you put the staff on like that. Now with eighth notes, you do a quarter note, and then you just add a flag, and it comes up, and it goes almost all the way up to the note head when you're doing handwritten stuff. And if you want to do a 16th note, which is half this, you just put 2 of them in there like that. That's when you have a flag. Okay. Now sometimes if you have 2 eighth notes together like this, you can use what's called a beam, and you beam them together. So you put your quarter note, you're making kind of quarter notes, but then you connect them like that. And that is the same. That means the same thing. So if we were a quarter note with the beat, right, we'd go, right? If they were quarter notes, then I'll just write them as quarter notes here. Then we've got, right? So those are the quarter notes. And if they were half notes, then we would get 2 beats per note. 1, 2. Okay, So that's kind of how that works. Let's go back to the text here for a second. So that's, and then in this next section, we're talking about beams. And you can see that here, you can have a quarter note, and that equals 2 eighth notes, or you can beam them together if they're within the beat. Quarter note equals 4 16th notes, or you can beam them together like that, where you have the 4 16th notes, but then you put 2 beams on the bottom. And then these are 32nd notes, and that means you've got 8 32nd notes in the space of a quarter. Okay, so this kind of shows why it's easier to, I'm just going to play that. Right, here's the beat, and it goes. Right, so I'm just going to play it here. Right, there's the beat. 2 and. So the beats, and you can see that the beams on the notes, they show where the beats are. So you beam all the notes together that are within the beat. Here's beat 1, here's beat 2, here's beat 3, and beat 4. And if you have 8th notes or 16th notes in there, you can beam them together so that it shows more easily where the beats are. Okay, the next thing is dotted notes. Now a dot, actually, you put it, you have the whole note. I'm just going to write it on here. So if we have what a dot does is it just adds half the value to that, to the note that it's following. So a whole note gets 4 quarter notes, right? 4 beats, if we say that the quarter note's the beat. And then we add a dot, and that adds 2 more beats. So that would make it 6 beats. Okay, how about a dotted quarter note? A dotted quarter note equals a quarter note plus half the quarter note. The value of the quarter note, which is an 8th note, equals a quarter note plus an 8th note. Right? So let's just do a rhythm here. Okay, so let's do okay, so we've got, here's a dotted quarter note and an 8th note and then 2 quarter notes. And if we try to find out where the beats are, so here's beat 1, and let's say that the quarter note equals the beat. Okay, here's beat 1, and the quarter note gets a beat and a half. So quarter note, the beat 2 is somewhere in here, and then we've got on the offbeat of 2, and then we get 3 and 4. So this rhythm would be, if here's the beat, 1, 2, and 3, 4, right? So we hold that one longer, we hold this one longer than 1 beat, and then we put that half beat on the end. 1, 2, and 3, 4, and that's kind of how you can count them. And we'll get more practice with that as we go. Okay, so that's dotted notes. Let's go to, here's some more examples of dotted notes. And this one is pretty interesting. I've been working on the railroad. You know that song, right? 1, 2, here's the beat. 4. I, 2, and 1. Right? So you see there's some dotted notes in here, and that's why we get this bum, 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 because we're subdividing the beat into 4 parts, and the 8th note here gets an 8th note plus a 16th, and then you got your last 16th, because remember there's how many 16ths in a beat in a quarter note? 4. So here's 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And if we think of that, 1 and then the 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Here's the beat, and I'm dividing it into 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, right? So you can divide the beat into 4 pieces, and this gets 3 of the 4, and then that gets the last 4th, right? And you'll get some practice in Practicum Musica working with these. Okay. Now every note, what it says here, every note value has an equivalent rest. These are the rests, and these kind of look like hats, the half rests, and I'll show you how to do them on notation. And here's a quarter rest, an 8th rest, and a 16th rest. Okay, so the whole rest kind of hangs off the staff. The half rest sits on top of the staff. The quarter rest, I'll show you how to draw that. Looks like that. And the 8th rest and the 16th rest. And then you can add dots to the rest too. Now I'm going to show you how to do a rest. Whole rest hangs off this this line. And you just kind of do it like that. That's a whole rest. So that'd be a whole measure if we have 4 beats to the measure. Here's a half rest, and that kind of sits on the middle line. And then if we did a quarter rest, an easy way to do a quarter rest is you just do kind of a Z, a reverse Z, and then a stem like that. So like that. That's a quarter rest. Yeah. So a reverse Z, and then you do your big C on a 3 and then a Z, C. And that would be 2 quarter rests. An 8th rest is pretty easy. You just an 8th rest, you just go like this, and you draw a dot in the C line, up and then down like that. That's 2 8th rests. 16th rest, you do the same thing, and then you put a little slash on it. So that's kind of how you write them handwritten. 8th rest, 16th rest. And what the rest is, that means that it's silence. Okay, so if you've got music here, you're going to hear music all along the way. If you get a rest, that means that there is silence. So you have to notate, you know, where am I going to have silence? So let's just do a quick rhythm here. And I'm going to do it in bass clef. There's a quarter note, not a very, very pretty quarter note. I'm going to do a rest. Okay. So here's the beat. 2, 3, 4, 1, rest. 3, 4, 1, 2, off. Right? So here's beat 1. Here's beat 2, which is silence. Here's 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. Then you're off. Okay? So as long as there's a note there, then there's going to be sound. If there's a rest, then it's going to be silent. Okay. Like it said, yeah, rests, you just don't skip over them. You have to make sure that the beat continues. 1, rest, rest, and 3, right? And 4. And then that's how you do rests and notes. And we'll get some practice in Practica Musica.